I'm in a rather funny place this evening as I'm being beamed at quite heavily, but I have now been fully discharged from the psychiatric hospital after 5 years, although I am now on a community treatment order whereby I have to observe certain conditions, mainly around taking my medication and not taking any narcotics for at least a year. But I am now a free man, which is very good. But there have been a couple of interesting instances in the past few days. Indeed, a couple of days ago, I was showing my surrogate grandfather, who was a fellow mental patient, I was showing him my YouTube channel on his television for him to subscribe to, and I was hit with a beam that basically came through the television, or seemed like it was coming through the television, which was very strange, but kind of used to whoever is behind these beams doing this now. And indeed, yesterday during my discharge meeting, where various professionals, so to speak, got together to authorize my discharge, basically, I came into the room and sat down, and the screen was on, the big screen, with several other mental health professionals calling in remotely to the meeting, and I was basically in the camera shot, and then suddenly I was attacked with a large beam, and I was sitting next to the ward manager, and I was thinking, I wonder what he'd think if I told him exactly what was going on right now with these beams. But I imagine if I told him anything about the beams, he would not have had me discharged. Indeed, this seems to be interesting because today I was heavily beamed at in almost a town centre, and this beaming, very heavy beaming, must have been a power play by the networks involved in my targeting, as indeed they now know I'm released and are basically showing their strength. But it's a strength through cowardice. I mean, attacking a mental patient with beams isn't exactly a respectable thing for an intelligence network to do. So, yes, that's the thing. So, I've been thinking along three main themes and how they are myths. Indeed, the supposed Russian threat, the fact that Russia is a threat to the West, is a myth. And I shall go into that in a minute. And the fact, supposedly, that the networks of the Faith of Ishmael are a threat to the West is also a myth. And the concept that Hebrews control the world is also a myth. Now, it's taken me a long time to come to these conclusions, especially the latter two. Though the first segment regarding Russia is an interesting one for me because of my interest in Russian history and culture and my affinity to Russians, especially Russian mental patients. I feel a certain kinship to them. Indeed, I have much Slavic heritage in my bloodlines, as well as Romany, interestingly, having done some research into my family tree. The majority of my forebears come from the Slavic areas of the old Austro-Hungarian Empire, and there are also various bloodlines of Romany Gypsy that link back to having lived in various parts of Eastern Europe also. Although I don't have any direct Russian heritage, I do feel a certain kinship towards Russia due to my own Slavic heritage. And so the Russian question has always been quite close to my heart. And indeed, I do not believe that Russia is a threat to the West. Indeed, despite the intellect and the quality of Russian intelligence operations, these are merely Russian intelligence operations used to basically stop Russia from becoming a complete colony of the West. though there are many Russian intelligence factions that want a Cold War to turn into a hot war, and indeed are working closely with the Anglo-German intelligence networks to attempt to achieve this. Indeed, the Russian intelligence services are very heavily penetrated, if not outright controlled, by MI6 and the Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst, which all makes for a very interesting situation. But the concept that Russian power is a threat to the West is a myth. There is no real Russian power. Indeed, there is no proper working infrastructure in that country. And in terms of military strength, they most probably cannot fight the ridiculously advanced weaponry and colossal power of the NATO countries. So, as I stated, Russian power is a myth, and the British authorities create and continue the myth of Russian power, which was originally started by the Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst networks around Reinhard Gehlen to basically usher in the Cold War, to ensure German strategic domination over the intelligence agencies of both East and West. And this myth of Russian power is constructed and propagated by the British intelligence services to maintain the military-industrial complex. Indeed, without the threat of Russian power, the system in Britain could actually collapse on itself, as the system needs to create an external enemy. Indeed, this links to the Gladio programs, whereby basically terrorist attacks and intelligence operations are carried out against the domestic population of, for instance, the United Kingdom and the other NATO countries, and then these attacks are blamed on the Russians when these attacks are actually carried out by paramilitaries of the NATO countries, fascist and Nazi groupings of paramilitaries of the NATO countries. And this so-called strategy of tension was most prominently seen in Italy, but it occurred all across the NATO countries during the Cold War and since the Cold War. The Operation Gladio program has never been wound down, which leads me on to my next point regarding the networks of the Faith of Ishmael. They are not a threat to the West either, but these Mujahideen-style networks and terrorist groupings are in fact all controlled by the British intelligence services to an extent, and most prominently by the Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst. And these networks form Operation Gladio 2 networks, which have the same purpose of basically creating more power for the cryptocracy within the NATO countries by creating an external enemy and blaming attacks which are actually false flag attacks on these networks. Indeed, the whole concept of fundamentalism within the religion of Ishmael was part of a long-term German strategic policy, part of their Ostmittelpolitik, which was created by the networks around Kaiser Wilhelm and one of his intelligence chiefs, von Oppenheim, who wished to utilize networks in the Middle East of the Faith of Ishmael, which were linked to the old networks of the assassins. They wished to utilize these networks for operations against their enemies. Indeed, the whole concept of the British and German feud that led to World War I was itself a creation of the intelligence networks that run those countries, who were actually working together but wished to create a tumult between the two nations. And part of this agenda was to use fundamentalists from the Middle East for these policies. And indeed, these fundamentalists in the modern concept are not a threat to the Western structure. Granted, they may be able to cause a little damage, but they're controlled by the very forces that run the Western structure. So it's all a bit of an interesting concept to grasp. Indeed, sorry, I've just lost my train of thought. Ah, God. I just received a rather large beam, which is interesting because they can see me now before I've even posted this video online, and probably watching me through the webcam and attacking me with beams. But the 7/7 bombings in London were themselves a Franco-German operation, which was directed by Franco-German networks, but through MI5 with MI6 logistical support. But these networks were Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst operatives and many French and British intelligence operatives who wished to basically carry out a Gladio 2 false flag attack and create a sense of fear amongst the population. And also, it would serve the purpose of trauma-based programming, which is part of the general framework of British intelligence and the Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst. And they utilize their Ishmaelite fundamentalists for this purpose. But I've been down many rabbit holes in the past where I basically believed that the faith of Ishmael was the biggest threat to the society I live in, but this is not actually the case. And moving on to the third point, that the myth of the Hebrews controlling the world. Indeed, the Frankist networks appear to be wishing to cause another burnt offering of their own ethnic group, as they did in the Second World War. So they basically caused the situation in the Middle East to basically begin another burnt offering, whereby they sacrifice their own kin, which seems to be an ongoing concept of theirs. They sacrifice their own kin to Moloch. And this is basically the situation that's going on in the Middle East, with Israelis not being able to leave their country and basically having all sorts of weaponry aimed against them, which indeed the armaments of Iran were built up by Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst operatives and Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst operatives within the Soviet military intelligence capacity. And this is all part of the dialectic that the Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst wishes to progress. And the Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst are utilizing their ongoing concept of the Ishmaelite fundamentalists for this purpose, utilizing various regimes in the Middle East, which is all part of their long-range operative plan. Indeed, sorry, the beams do make me quite weak and rather tired a lot of the time, but I'm trying to surf the waves, surf the microwaves. Indeed, the last point I wanted to make was that one that I've spoken of before, and I would like to reiterate, that the British intelligence and Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst networks wish to shut down the operations of the Frankist intelligence networks and networks of bankers surrounding the Rothschild consortium. And to do this, they are dangling out these networks and stating that they rule the world. It's all an intelligence front, but most of the information you will find on conspiracies on the internet leads you to that conclusion. However, that's what they want you to think. Indeed, I believe Miles Mathis has rather a lot to answer for, and he causes me a lot of confusion sometimes. But the thing is, I believe Miles Mathis isn't actually one guy. He's actually a team of operatives, most probably in Langley, who are churning out this information to basically deceive you. Once you've reached the heights of conspiracy thinking, you get to a point and He's basically there to block you from getting any further and take you down a rabbit hole that isn't actually the way you should be going. And it's all part of the British intelligence and Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst long-range deception strategies to make you believe that there is a Hebrew conspiracy to rule the world. Granted, there are very powerful Frankists, but the Hebrews do not control the world. This is a myth. So a lot of stuff I've said in the past was myself falling under misdirection with a certain amount of programming. So I would like to dispel these myths, basically. Myths that I have fallen for myself in the past. And I admit that. However, I do not feel guilty that I did, because there is so much intelligence chicanery going on that makes it, even once you've progressed in the levels of conspiracy thinking, you can still fall down the rabbit holes they want you to fall down into. And so it's very difficult to actually figure out exactly what is going on. And I do not know exactly what is going on. I am just one man. I am a lunatic. And I'm very happy being one. However, I do not have the clearances to be able to build a proper picture of the exact strategies of the British intelligence and Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst networks. Now, I'm pinning these two networks because I believe that they are the ongoing networks of the British and German Druid orders that ruled their respective countries before the Roman domination took hold. Indeed, the Romans were a different network of families, and the Roman Catholic Church was a continuation of the Roman secret police. In the last days of the Roman Empire, the Roman secret police basically folded itself and then reformed itself as the Roman Catholic Church. And the Anglo-German Druids, who had ruled their respective areas and most of Europe before the Romans, they wished to reassert themselves and began doing that really with the Knights Templar, and eventually began their long-range penetration of the Roman networks. Indeed, the Roman networks are just as diabolical as the Anglo-German networks, but the Anglo-German networks seem to have gained the ascendancy, and there isn't really a proper Roman network anymore, as they have been overtaken basically in prominence by the Anglo-German Druids, who now run the pinnacle of the Roman Catholic Church, i.e. the seat of the Vatican, and run the entire Holy See and its intelligence services. So, indeed, the Frankists have always, and their forebears, have always played a part in the intelligence machinations between the Anglo-German Druids and the Roman secret police. And yes, this is the way it all appears to be to me. So I believe the Anglo-German Druid networks are attempting to shut down the operations of the Frankists, as they believe they're too obvious in their activities, while the Anglo-German networks like to lurk in the shadows. And indeed, it may not even be that. They're just literally using the Frankist networks and the Rothschild consortium as a scapegoat. So I would like to dispel the myths that Russia is a threat to the West. I would like to dispel the myth that the fundamentalist networks of the faith of Ishmael are a threat to the West. And I would like to dispel the myth that the Hebrews control the world. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you.